Well, good afternoon. We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I'm Bill Carell, and I have been for most of my life. That said, I'm here with my compadres, Lisa Sheehan, Jan Jeremias, and also Ken Caputo. And between us, our goal is to deliver some interesting conversation. It'll be interesting to us, I'm sure, but we're really hoping it'll be interesting to you as well. And while you're listening, you have an opportunity to see some things for yourself, maybe get a little bit closer to being empowered if you're not already, or maybe pushing to the best day ever if you're already in an empowerment state. So, with that, I think the words that I want to pick today, and I haven't thought of them yet, and I will take suggestions.
Oh, you want suggestion?
Nope, I just thought of two words.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Okay, so these are two D words. We did a lot of E work 2 years ago, but let's talk, a little bit about discretion and discernment. And what's interesting about those two words is in the silence when all four of us were sort of looking at each other and I said I would take suggestions, they just showed up. And I have no idea what that's going to relate to, but I have a feeling it'll give us some interesting threads. So we have our secretary looking up the uh, definitions of those two words. But in the meantime, Ken, you want to kick it off? Any thoughts on either of those two words?
Uh, I think discernment is a very valuable thing. That feels more like an inward facing, and then discretion is outward facing because it requires a sensitivity to consequences of the things that you put out into the world, you know?
Yeah.
So, and how you balance your own personal choices, thoughts, opinions, insights, knowledge with the impact it's going to have around you.
Yeah.
Um, but discernment is something my mentor would talk a lot about that. And, going through the process of recognizing that you will always have ignorance and, as best you can, choosing to dispel that and also knowing it exists no matter how hard you try. So it's discernment is a process. It's not like I know. At least the wisest people I know, they don't say they know. They say they don't know, and then they explain what's been revealed to them at this point in time. So
Yeah.
that's what I got.
Yeah. It's more like a seeming than a hard fact. Like that's, I guess, the best relationship that we have to what goes on around us is our interpretation is always going to have some kind of a cloud over whether or not we're seeing what's truly there. So discernment being, I think of the two words, they almost fit hand in glove the way you described it. I really like that.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, they seem kind of like there's a little yin and yang to them, the way that they can interact with each other to create something that feels like balance.
Hmm. Lisa, have you got
So
a
our
definition for us or
yeah,
two?
discernment is the ability to judge well, simply put. Or in Christian context, perception is the absence of judgment with a view to obtaining spiritual guidance and understanding.
Yeah, you could actually take the word spiritual out of it, and that's a
Yeah,
pretty good working definition for what you and I go through every single day. And then how
from
about
that
just
perspective. Yeah. And hold on, back up. And discretion is the quality of behaving or speaking in such a way as to avoid causing offense or revealing private information, or the freedom to decide what should be done in a particular situation.
I like the second one better than the first, to be honest with you. The prediction that Ken was talking about of what your action or your speech is going to create, and being responsible and accountable for having put it out there. before you do, you know, like that thoughtful place to come from, and tying it all together. When Jan talks about, holding space for something or for someone, that's almost like in the act of discerning, like, for
So
instance,
something
what's the
about
next thing? Yeah, what's the next thing to get said here? That question that constantly goes through my mind.
I was just reading about, how there's a third way usually, and they were talking about there's the third moment. There's the second you get the whatever is coming into your field, and then there's the identifying of it through your systems, and
Yeah.
then there's a moment you could take there to actually discern, like you were saying, which way to go. And that's the hard moment, I think, to even cause, never mind realize you can actually take a third moment.
Yeah, along those lines, 80% of being effective in life is to have that recognition of a moment to act, or a moment to respond, or a moment to listen, and making your choice from all of the above, and many, many more possibilities. A little bit like being a shortstop, you know, the ball comes in your direction. Your job is to not let it get by you. And if you knock it down in front of you with your chest, that's a successful play for a shortstop. It's still where you can reach down, pick it up, and throw it somewhere. Gets by you, it's out into the field. That used to be the advice that I would give all the people that worked for me. Just play heads up ball.
Get in front of it.
Be ready for anything, but never let your fear of getting hit by the ball take you out of the play. You're going to feel worse if it gets by you.
I have to tell a funny because I used to play adult softball, and my dad would coach. He coached for a little while, and he always tells the story how we somebody out in right field, and she was veering more towards too far to her left, and so my dad would tell her to move back over, get in the field, play better, and she goes, "But there's no shade there. I'm playing here. I'm sorry."
When you're right, you're right.
That was her discretion or discernment.
I like it.
Mhm.
Bazooka Joe Bubblegum, they had those little comics in it. And I guess the one of the guys' name was Jiff, and he was like this tall, skinny guy with a turtleneck on, and in the first frame, the guy asks him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm looking for a quarter I dropped." He said, "Yeah, so where'd you drop it?" He said, "Over there on that corner, but the light's better over here."
Right.
What exactly is crazy, by the way?
It's only crazy it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's all a matter of point of view, isn't it? Like, one man's crazy is another guy's brilliance, or gal.
Sometimes the only thing that really determines what's crazy is time. Things have to unfold. May seem crazy in the moment and then be not so crazy, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense until it doesn't.
Yep. They used to burn people at the stake for saying that the sun didn't revolve around the earth. And remember when the earth was flat,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and washing your hands would never occur to a surgeon, but midwives did it all the time for some reason.
They were witches.
They were, my goodness. So the,
That's
you
an
know,
interesting thing because it points to how discernment can actually be weaponized. If you if I know that someone feels that they're seeing something clearly and they're very invested in it, I can leverage that to get something that I want from them, attention or money or Instagram views, whatever, you know. So now it becomes, how do you, I actually think about this a lot, especially I've been enjoying watching the news with curiosity and looking at the motives behind the message that's being shared and the way the message is being shared. So it's fascinating when you watch it from that perspective. And what's interesting is now you're in a position where you have to be able to actively and continuously question not only your level of ignorance, but also gain a clear understanding of the other person's reason for working to dispel your discernment. Why are they doing that? you know so it's very tangled, and it's so loud now. It's just really fascinating. It's no wonder why people are so confused you know
And Ken, what you do with the news, I do with anything health oriented. Like
hmm
anything medical, that's me. I'm like, what's their agenda and where do they get backing and where's their money coming from? And yeah, I do the same thing.
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
Constantly,
I do it with the fitness industry a lot. Yeah, for
we call that
it's
critical
amazing.
thinking, and we might be the last generation that was taught that way.
and I do it all the time. Sometimes, yeah. So I think that, and it's pretty, like you said, in the fitness industry. And so I think when you have I don't want to say a field of expertise, but maybe something that you spend a lot of time in or that you've been in for a long time, you tend to, I think well, after a while, you tend to do that because you're so engulfed in it.
Yeah, and I think this is not new. I mean, how there have been snake oil salesmen for
Mhm.
millennia. you
Right.
know and often I think what makes it really challenging is, you'll see it in the fitness industry. Someone they've created a dramatic result for themselves, and they genuinely believe that they can duplicate that for everyone if they just do what they did. And we're too complicated physiologically for that to be true. There's so many, genetic components, environmental components, and so it's just, but they have such passionate belief and desire to help that their discernment is clouded, but to them it's incredibly clear. It's everybody else that doesn't understand. If they would wake up to their way of thinking and just do what they're told, they would by not listening to anyone else. So it's really interesting. But yeah, you definitely see it in the wellness, the supplement industry, all of that.
But
uh,
even in more traditional modalities, because I think
oh god, yeah.
what you're seeing is basically a system where one size fits all is supposed to work, and it
Yeah.
doesn't. And so you have a lot of situations where, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not a peg and I don't fit in that hole kind of thing. And trying to navigate it when you aren't fitting in or you're not the quote unquote
hmm
norm is quite complex
yeah
and
my
challenging at times.
Yeah, my herbalist friend, I mean, he'll talk about the first thing you need to do is figure out what type of person. Are they a hot person, a cold person? Are they, like what? It's this whole interview process to determine how the herb will interact with them. So it's not like take this herb to remedy that. It's no, we have to experiment and figure out how these herbs stimulate your your natural ability to come back into balance, whatever that means for you. So
Mhm.
it's a very customized and individual thing. It's not take ginkgo biloba and your memory will be better. It's it's not wrong, but it's also not really accurate. And it's the same thing, in Western medicine. It's yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, there are some specific instances that have to be satisfied, and I really love the whole notion of that one size fits all. Generally, don't fit all, and that's pretty universal. So like with any generality, it's really clipping off the majority of people that either aren't aware of it, have no interest in even finding out what it's about. But now we're talking about something one size fits all universally, and that's usually generally false, right? So when you're hearing advice from people, you again, that critical thinking is again, what's up with this? What conversation are we actually in here? It's like when you take a screaming child and you hand them a toy to play with while you're telling them, would you like some ice cream or something like that? And that just is a distraction. It has absolutely nothing to do with responding to whatever it is that they're acting out about. But my wife was always a master at all that kind of stuff. Here, play with this, and it worked, for a 2 or 3 year old.
Well, it also
She
works
does
for
that with
pets.
me too sometimes, but
It works for pets really well too.
yeah,
Like, you don't want them to do something, give them something else to do,
right,
and you're much better off doing that than telling them not to do what you don't want them to do.
right.
Is just to distract them and get them really interested in that bone or whatever, playing catch versus chewing something. It's just like, okay, come on over
Yeah.
here.
Well, now you're back to thinking about the motivation. Like if the parent's motivation
Right.
is what's best for my child, that's a different motivation from I just need quiet, you
Hmm.
know? So their action is going to be, you may get the same result, like a quieter child, but coming from two different directions and choosing two different solutions that were influenced by the motivation of the person offering them.
Yeah.
So, and that's where it can get a little scrambled.
Well, when
It's
you
kind
said, when you were talking about originally, when like a few seconds ago, my brain went to parenting actually, Ken, before you brought it up, and this
Mm.
whole idea of motivation and objective, and in basically in what parents do and what kids know their parents want of them, and
Mhm.
how that, I want to say, alters what we might do as an individual, because basically we know what they want, and if we want to please them, then all of a sudden we've altered what we want. Maybe we don't discern because we know what they want from us.
It brings back a memory from about 3 years ago when grandsons were here. And typically, when they're away from grandma and grandpa, they kind of have wild behavior and it's normal. Okay. And we have absolutely no tolerance for the unending nonsense that goes on between two brothers and loud and all boisterous and all that sort of thing. So, first couple of days they're here, they're pretty well behaved and everything. And by day three, the normal, all right, guys, simmer down. All right, guys, and I have to pull out the concussive voice. This is the one where they're on the other side of the room and I project, you know, my volume and concentration of sound waves. So it actually, they'll feel it in their chest. It hits them like, it bounces off of them. And that you want to watch two boys settle down like in a hurry. It's like Felix the cat and Vavoom that used to knock mountains down. It's kind of the same thing. Ken, I know you have that capability too, to be able to use your voice to project energy across a room and have people actually feel the energy. But it was kind of cool. And then about an hour later, Jack, the older one, came in and said, "How'd you do that, Grandpa?" So the outcome of that was created some curiosity in him. And I said, when you get a large enough chest where you can really push the air very, very hard, it's almost like a laser shot. And he says, I've never seen anything like that before. I said, you want to see it again? He said, no, thank you. Discernment, you
Well,
know?
when I looked up discernment, and it said insight, which fit, but with discretion, it said the ability to determine right from wrong, and it just was interesting to me that, I don't know, I that felt very negative to me. It's almost like insight is, I don't know, just has like a positive energy to me,
Yeah.
and the ability to turn, not that, it's just the way they phrased it. I was like, oh, kind of taken aback.
Well, it just goes to show you that, especially now in 2023, there isn't any agreement, like rock solid, like, Bill Clinton. It all depends on what the definition of the word is, and he wasn't wrong, but there wasn't a great listening for it, what he was trying to say. And it really made him uh, to be diminished in people's point of view. But I bet you, if we keep looking, we look for more definitions from a half a dozen different places, we might not get agreement between them. We might get something that actually in the real world means something completely different between two definitions of the word.
You might have to discern which
We
one you
might have to discern. And we use all three of our BS detectors.
Mhm.
So, you know, in the discernment process, is that a little analogous to learning? Or is it more of the weighing, the counterbalancing, compare and contrast?
I think learning can be a complementary skill set to, improving your abilities of discernment, you know, because you're learning to take in new information and apply it and that kind of thing. And I'm sure as you're in the process of discerning, it leads to learning, you know.
Like a chicken and an egg
so
going on
so
there, isn't
they yeah, they sort of, probably work hand in hand to a degree. Yeah, I think it's what strikes me in conversations with people. Actually, I've been working with someone who's got, he's like not really going down the rabbit hole, but he's digging pretty deep right now into a lot of different nutritional pathways for, like getting in shape and losing a bunch of weight and that kind of thing. And, so he's learning about keto versus carnivore versus, you name it. And it's really interesting because one of the things that he's struggling with is the people who are advocating for these things all make sense. So there's all some value to what they're saying, and the thing we've been talking about is really the discernment is going to come from his ability to be very self-aware and open and try to quantify the results he's getting. How are you sleeping? How are you feeling? Is your body composition changing, or your energy levels, and blood work too? So, because you may feel great
Yeah.
and be screwing yourself up internally in a way that you can't measure, you got to go get a blood panel done to know if this is really good or not. So it's just kind of interesting. He's going through this whole process of the learning, in a sense, is almost clouding discernment. So he has to figure out how to separate those out. And it's a lot of work. And it'd be much easier to just believe what he's being told and then go do it. And then when it doesn't work, it's going to be his fault for not doing it right. This is often how it's framed for people. So
I remember being in certain situations in my life where I really wanted to come to that determination on my own. So I kept like, I didn't ask anybody else's opinion. I really wanted to figure it out. And I felt like if people gave me information that was going to somehow alter what I felt and thought. So I really was going internal. I was doing a lot of my own research kind of thing on whatever it was, but I really wanted to be totally information overload. And I'm talking about significant like family members. Like I really didn't want to know what my parents thought about whatever it was and things like that. And it was the best way for me to kind of say, okay, well, I'm going to make my own decision. And part of the reason was because then I knew if it didn't work, I didn't want to get to the place where I blamed someone else because I had like listened to them and then it didn't work out. I was like, I want to take responsibility if it doesn't work. And so I'm
Mhm.
going to come to my own decision on my own, totally on my own is the way I felt. And I'm not saying that's right, but, and I don't know how old I was. I was probably 20 or 21, but I was very clear in the fact that I didn't want their intervention at all.
Yeah.
Mm.
kind of an interesting leadership style as well. You talk about the two that we're discussing, where you're doing your own research and all the rest of that, and there are a lot of in my experience, people that I have known who were not comfortable, being the CEO of the company in those instances, and so they actually did follow the directions of whoever they talked to last before it was time to make a decision. And we used to call that the last man in mode. And if you really wanted to see something, that you believed in happen, you wanted to make sure you were the last person that before the decision was made.
Mm.
And I mean, literally, people would stand around the office and look at the door, and and wait to go in. But and then then somebody had a conversation with them and said, Larry, there's this effect that the most recent conversation is the one that drives the decision. And he said, you know why that is? He said, the person that comes to me last is the one that I trust the most. How's that for making some stuff up in advance and then living your life by it? I mean, we weren't talking small decisions either. We're talking about hiring people, spending millions of dollars on advertising and marketing, and new products and what have you. And it was like, he was confessing, I don't really know anything. Of course, all the ideas are going to come from other people. And that last person who's coming to my office knows that I've already heard from everybody else. So they really have to be committed to their ideas. I don't know. That's an interesting interpretation of how the world works, in my view.
Well, and what are the odds that that came from that being a successful process? At some point it produced a result, or he created some kind of correlation with that result. And then if he came invested in it, he's gonna he's gonna discern things in a way that confirm and validate that style.
Yeah.
So, and if he's, if you're in that place of, we all have this addiction to confirmation bias, it just feels so good. So he's going to keep, someone disagrees with it, they get fired, or, you start creating the echo chamber that supports it,
Yeah.
and you find ways to point outward towards anything that doesn't support it as not being due to that. It's got to be something else. It's that now that vague, huge they that floats around and influences everything that's happening to us that's bad comes into play. you know
The face,
you
the
know
faceless blame catchers,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Isn't that what social media does too? It's like the second you
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at the topic, it starts reinforcing, and then you go, "Oh, maybe that's correct," because the last thing you research seems like the best all of a sudden, and then it gets reinforced constantly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the other thing too, Lisa, is if you believe it strongly enough, even after you've been fooled and you're being told that you've been fooled, you don't want to give it up.
That's right.
People, they'll go to their graves going, "Yeah, maybe it was like that, but no, I know." It's just
Well,
crazy.
there's a reason too. I
Yeah,
like everybody calls it, your shelf help, self-help book is like the last person I listen to sounds like the best idea, and I'll buy the book, and and then I like the next one and the next one and the next one. So
yeah,
at some
Yeah.
point there is a level of discernment, like which do you want to follow? Like Ken said, to the degree that you want it to help you, you yourself, you discern that that's the path to take for your own self improvement.
And when you feel like there's a lack of control in your life and you just want help, you want something to work, one way to do that is just try harder. So you either keep investing more energy or time or money or whatever it is, attention, or you just keep flitting from thing to thing, hoping that you'll find the right thing. It's like getting rich by buying the lottery ticket every day. You're just hoping eventually one of those tickets is going to come in, you know? So
that's
yeah,
an
it can be
excellent.
very addictive. That's like a whole thing, how addictive self-help can become,
Oh
you know?
yeah,
I mean, I think that I've done, through the years, I've done so many different trainings. I think maybe like us all. And I remember I would, you sit there and you take training with someone who really, and they're enthusiastic, and you think, oh my gosh, this is it. And
Mhm.
then time goes on and you take someone else, and all of a sudden, that's it. And then you realize you take pieces from all of them, and you kind of use what
Hmm.
you want, and or which seems to fit with you, and then you let the rest go. But it takes a little while. All of a sudden, after you've done that, I don't know how many different things with how many different people, where all of a sudden you think to yourself, hmm, I'm just bouncing, or I'm just like, it's all good, but very easy to get trapped in that kind of scenario where you keep on doing that.
Yeah, you hit a point at some point where it's your own voice speaking.
Hmm.
And then when that happens, it's very powerful. That's where breakthroughs really occur. And the interesting part of it is I enjoy personal coaching almost as much as I enjoy business coaching with the right people. And it's never going to be with somebody who wants me to give them a prescription, because we can all write the steps out in what you need to do in order to make a cake. But to be successful in real estate, or to be successful in building wealth, you've got to play heads up ball all the time and be ready to, look for nuances and changes and discern when it's time to act. Because there's times to be buying in, and there's times to be selling and sitting out on the side. And over a lifetime, when you go through and you get beat up a couple of times, I mean, to the point where you've experienced a massive failure like you've never had before in your entire life. And that allows you to view situations that you go through afterwards through a different lens. And it may go from being a little bit fearful, and that when you're starting to see things trending like they may have trended a while ago, or it's like, I know what to do. I've got balance here. I've got other things I can check in with. But
You
no,
said three. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bill. Sorry. I thought you were done talking.
well, I'm never done talking, Ken. So yeah, I think the personality differences, and when people are in a coaching relationship as a partnership, as opposed to a mentor and a mentee, I think it's a lot more enjoyable and a lot more powerful. It's about the 5% that they can't see, but they've got 95% handled. And that's what I do, is I coach the 5%, the small things that anybody can do that become habits after a period of time, and with enough feedback on what they're doing, so you're not really throwing a book with 70 or 80 different things to do that nobody can do. That's figuring out what that prescription is going to be, like, the diagnosis of what's missing, or what needs to change, or what needs to be removed, or what needs to be added. It's very personal, and not everybody responds to every type of advice.
I think of doing that when I work with people on a health issue, on a more wellness aspect, because I ask people to look deeper than symptoms.
Yeah.
And I think what you're talking about is, like you said, is someone who's willing to go deeper and look at those symptoms, and not just want, I'll use this example. If they have chronic headaches, is not just try to take a pill to get rid of the headaches, but look at why they get headaches.
Yeah.
And, looking deeper for that. And not everybody wants to do that.
And that's true, because the last thing you want is for somebody to just believe you and do what you say, because they can't possibly understand until they've had experience to go along with it. And at the same time, without the experience, if they just get lucky once or twice, it's hit and miss. It's not something that they can now stand on and progress, and has actually turned into a good habit for them.
I was reflecting on three questions from a book called The Road Less Stupid. And it's, when you're thinking about making a decision, ask yourself these three things. What's the upside? What's the downside?
Yeah.
And can you live with the downside? And, and that's very different. Like entrepreneurially, you know, quitting your job and starting your own business, the upside may be, building the life of your dreams. The downside may be you might lose everything. Can you live with that? Like, not some people are like, no, I could not live with that, the risk of that downside. Others are like, that's fine. I know someone who's actively dying right now because they chose food over longevity, and they're close to 500 pounds. They're in renal failure. They've had a wonderful life. They've eaten everything they wanted to eat, never had an interest in exercise, incredible singer in the choir, and they're not comfortable with dying, but they accept it. And
Right.
to them, the downside of eating just kind of indiscriminately because they enjoyed it so much, it was worth it. Worth it. So all the, on my Facebook feed, because I'm in fitness and everything, there's all these people screaming. One guy right now is saying, don't eat bananas because the sugar in bananas isn't as good as the sugar in something else. And, there's better choices. And I'm thinking, man, if you have to work that hard to be perfect with your nutrition, what's it really costing you to eat the banana? Yeah. you know and for him, he doesn't want to live with that downside. He wants this, whatever it is he perceives is that it's doing for him, and he's a fierce advocate for it. But
Yeah.
my, this very large friend would laugh hysterically at that. Like, I'm gonna eat a dozen bananas in an ice cream split.
Yeah. In between the boxes
And
of
be happy
chocolate.
for it. Now, I wouldn't choose that. I don't want to live with that downside personally, but who am I to judge? So it's interesting. I just wonder, if you ask someone those three questions, if you'd have a better context for why they're discerning things in the way that they are and what they're choosing to do with that information.
Yeah.
Well, I think the ability to look at something and say, well, I wouldn't do this, but that's fine for someone else is
Mhm.
kind of an advanced level, because I'll have that in certain situations. And let's say it's religious situations for the people I'm around. And it's not a choice for me. I didn't decide to lead my life like that. And I have to, and for a long time, I don't even think I realized that I was being judgmental of them. Like I always felt like they were being judgmental of me because I wasn't like them, and then realized how judgmental I was of their lifestyle, and then realizing that I couldn't do it. And that's not the life I chose, but that's not the life I chose, and that's not I'm not living that life. Like, and I can't make that decision for them. If that makes them happy, then it makes them happy.
That's why I
Yeah.
kind of like
Talking to him
The
about,
Buddhists that I know. They're like
yeah.
they're like, oh yeah, it's believing what you believe, doing what you do, and you'll come back around and it'll be what it is. Oh wow, those are choices. Tell me what that hell realm's going to be like. They're just, they're not trying to save you or rescue you. They're happy to talk about, the lists and the steps and the things that you can do if you want to practice, like, along their framework, but they're not really overly invested in your choices. It's more like a curiosity thing. Not all of them, but the ones that I've talked to, it's, that's the sense I've always gotten in the dialogue.
Yeah. Well, giving advice to somebody who is not interested in it is like analogous to teaching a pig to sing. It sounds really horrible, and it annoys the pig, right? So most people are not interested in hearing other people's opinions unsolicited about habits that they have.
Well, either that
Generally.
or
Which I think is way too, yeah. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was thinking I think it's why certain groups are formed so they can have that space and not be fixed, saved, or advised like I've done in circles of trust. You can speak and then not be just completely listened to, and then no advice is ever given, and that's why you're there. Just to kind of work it out for yourself, discern for yourself
Hmm.
internally. Without the outside influence to get to that point.
And isn't that the nature of the whole self-help movement that started in the 60s and 70s? Probably starting with salespeople and getting into other walks of life, and then personal fitness, and just life challenge and the Tony Robbins stuff and all the rest of that. It's something you can do privately, listening to a tape or listening to a CD, or something of that nature, as opposed to going to Overeater Anonymous meeting and telling people what your story is, and hashing it out that way. When you get to a point where you're 500 pounds, what do you think that life looks like from the inside? I have no idea. I can't even imagine. Remember that beautiful Hawaiian man who sang "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" with a ukulele?
Who's
Yeah, and what a beautiful voice. And he just shone very brightly for a short period of time, and I think he passed away like 2 or 3 years after becoming very famous.
Well, as you were describing that self-help thing, Bill, I think you're looking at meditation, which has been around for centuries and centuries,
Yeah.
which was that point where you could basically, that's what you were doing. You were going inside and you were cultivating those those discernment skills as much as you can in quiet,
Yeah.
and the thing about meditation I always say is that, when you're in it, if you're really committed, there's no way to go. It's like you can't
Mhm.
escape yourself. It's kind of like, okay, here I am.
Oh,
Yeah.
I will say just I kind of I get a little critical sometimes of the self-help movement now, and that saved my life. Like, I mean, it started back, when I was in my early 20s with like Brian Tracy and then Dennis Waitley's Psychology of Winning, listening to that. In just it opened my world up to what I could do to be a better human. And
Mhm.
without those people, and then following Tony Robbins, and just there's a list of them. And so it's like anything. It's you have to find the balance to where your consumption doesn't consume you, you know? So, but I think there's a tremendous amount of value. And, I think one of the challenges now is there's no real gatekeepers anymore. So anyone can become a self help guru and say anything. And there's not, like if you were going to become a internationally known speaker pre-internet or during the birth of the internet, you had to work hard to gain enough attention. You had to have that, and it had to be quality for the most part. There were charlatans, there always will be, but I think it's harder now for people because there's so much of it, and it's hard to determine whether it has quality, or if it's just regurgitated from them consuming a bunch of it from other people and then just tossing it down the telephone chain.
What's really cool, Ken, along those lines, it was very great to be a personal or business coach in the 1990s, because, like
Mm,
you said, you had to, have the credentials. You had to be able to demonstrate to people a track record of good performance, and have a great reputation with all the people that you're in a coaching relationship with. Well, the new thing is to be a coach of coaches, because everybody wants
mhm,
to be a coach now. And so now you charge these people $500 a month, and put them through programs and all this other kind of stuff. So you can continue doing that with them year after year after year. And it's all
mm.
based on this one really interesting and may or may not be true sentence. It's called, everybody who's doing something for growth has a coach, even coaches. Now, when I hear a coach say that, if you don't have a coach, you ain't growing. I kind of sit back and I go, where's my focus? If I'm in a service delivery business, my focus is on me second. But there are people who have no clients and pay thousands of dollars a year for a coach to help them with some aspect of what they want to do to build a business. I've got a very good friend who's an affiliate marketer, and she pays a guy $2,000 a quarter, And I said, so what's he doing to help you grow your income? She goes, nothing. We don't talk about that. What's he coaching you for? Well, he's coaching me so that I can become an expert in my products and how I can do some things on the internet that sooner or later, after I write my book, and then I have and I'm going, you're paying this guy $8,000 a year and he's not contributing anything to your bottom line. She goes, no. And I said, does that make a lot of sense to you? She said, I enjoy it. And I said, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I mean that's if for a relationship with money is that's I mean if you're just exchanging money for perceived value anyway. So
And she
it's
doesn't
interesting you say
consider
that
that
though,
a
because
lot.
like yeah, Joe Polish at the Genius Network, their whole thing, it's 25 grand for the year,
Yeah.
and you need to turn that into a quarter million bucks. That's like the whole point is if you're joining this network, it's to leverage to improve your bottom line for your business. So
Yep.
they're very clear about that. So it's like exactly speaking to the thing that you were just talking about. And that's the way that they do it and quantify it,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that I remember talking with him at one point, and, there are people that just want to be in the room. They want the prestige of being in the room with all of these, kind of the Peter Diamonduses of the world or whoever. And that's not enough. You have to have a business. It's got to be producing at a certain level. And then you've got to be able to take it to another level if you want to be you know, in that group so that they're all aligned in their purpose and, doing the work together.
Yeah.
So
In my opinion, there's a certain amount of integrity in having those types of agreements that this just can't be you pay me and we talk, that I'm
yeah,
not interested in that
yeah,
in the first place. And the growth that I get is going to be as a result of, making a difference, not only in your life, but your family's lives, all your employees' lives, that's a bigger game to play than just, getting paid for a few hours of conversation a month.
yeah. I've never had an interest in that. I've talked to many teachers, actually. A really close friend who's a Tai Chi teacher. He stopped teaching Tai Chi because people were coming in and they were enjoying the classes and they'd take the class and nothing would change in their life. And he just didn't want to be an entertainer. He wanted to be a transformer. And for whatever reason, at that point, either the way he was teaching or the people he was attracting, that wasn't really happening. So he let it go.
Yeah.
And now he's come back to it. And he's teaching again in a very, you know, uh, not secretive, but just quiet way. Letting just very few people know. He doesn't market or promote himself or anything like that. Um, but yeah, it is interesting though. But for other people, as long as they're getting paid, they're good. And as long as the person that they're is paying the money feels good about it, that's fine. There's an exchange happening, everybody's in agreement, and life goes on.
We used to have this saying about people getting out of bed and going to their 9 to 5 every day, working just hard enough not to get fired, making just enough money not to quit. And that goes for solopreneurs too. There are
Mhm.
so many people that they stop working for somebody else, but they bring the same habits, to their own new business, and then they're really, really weirded out by why isn't it working?
Mm.
Why don't I have enough money? Well, where's the money part of your design? What's your value proposition? How are you going to attract people? You know, you got to have a goal to how much money you're going to make, like 25 grand, and you got to go 10x, or you're out the following year. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, I think buzzwords get thrown into, like the life balance became like a hot topic for a lot of consultants. I know I listen to
Mm.
them as an entrepreneur that, you're not doing it well if you're only working, if you don't have time for your family, and we're going to show you how you can get a better life balance, and
Mm.
then
Yeah, you know
it's
what,
another.
Lisa, that appeals to the hardworking solopreneur. Absolutely does.
Right. Right. I think that's the appeal and the downside of it too, well, not downside, but the appeal. And then, but how do you measure that? And so usually there's another layer to it, like we're going to help, build your bottom line by a certain percentage or something like that. So then even they're doing a balancing act too, to try to attract new clients, kind of thing.
Well,
Well,
the
and
interest.
what's the context? Like I know a guy he doesn't want any more customers than he can handle himself because he doesn't want to hire employees. He thinks that's just a nightmare. He tried it, he
Mhm.
hated it. It never worked out. He didn't feel that the quality of their work was as high as he could do himself. He just wants to do his own thing, and his net is what he needs to live the comfortable life that he's living, and he likes his work. And for some people, they don't want to spend time with family. They don't even want a family. They like work. The work is their family. So if
Yep.
that's the context, then so work-life balance, again, now we're back to, if you're going to take the herb, you got to figure out who it is that's taking the herb, and that's so
Well,
unique
yeah,
to each person.
Right. And I
to
and I think
that point exactly. To that point exactly. When somebody says they do not have balance in their life, then you have to go back and say, what kinds of decisions are you making before you
Mhm.
go do what you do every month, right? And you find somebody who has something that they can sell for $1 a piece. In order for them to make $1,000 a week, they have to do 1,000 sales a week, right? Well, the easiest thing that you can do is say, whatever you're delivering, the satisfaction that comes with what you're delivering for that dollar. Now try to find something that you can package that for $10 a piece. Now you have to do 100, or $100 a piece. Now you have to do 10. Or how about $1,000 a piece? Now you only have to do one. And so
Mhm.
the way that that goes in terms of building a business model is, if you think doing the thing that you can think of that gets your first order over and over and over again is a business model, then you're really not driving, the bus. You're riding in it. And then you're wondering why you spend so many hours at work, why you never see your kids' baseball games, why your wife or your husband is saying, you're always out going to networking meetings and doing self-help courses, and I never see you. Okay. So it all comes down to that. If you're going to have a coach, the coach should say, how do we keep this fun? How do we make it effortless? How do we, how do we connect all nine dots, And the interesting thing about that is that nobody has that answer on day one. That's the creation process, in my opinion. But you're right. When you're looking around and saying everybody else seems to be having more fun than I am, that self-help guru about balance, I've got a friend, his coaching tagline is the time off coach.
Well,
You
that's
know,
because most of the places they're teaching, find the problem and show them how to fix it. So you're always looking for, and even, I mean, well, in business especially, but what's their issue? What's their problem? What's the common problem that people in this industry are having?
yeah.
And then this is how I'm gonna fix it for you.
Yeah, and it's funny to watch people's taglines on LinkedIn morph
Mhm.
over time. How you got the name, and then there's like a 13 word, you know, whatever it is kind of coach that you're doing, and that's supposed to help you attract people on LinkedIn that want what you have to sell. I don't know.
Hashtag, yeah. All
Let me bring.
discernment.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I
You know,
said it's all discernment, Bill. Because
so
if
here,
you
let
don't
me
have that.
tell you the first sale that my partner and I ever did back in 1990. We sold a Unisys 286 with a dot matrix printer and a 12-inch CRT screen, and it was going to run software that my partner Dan wrote for accounting. Now, the 286 computer by itself was $5,000. The software that he wrote was $1,000. And then he needed to do updates. So he had a monthly income from this client of almost 250 or 300 bucks a month. Within 2 years, a 286 computer cost less than $500. So now we can't sell individual computers anymore. We've got to start getting good at doing networking and start growing the business out and then up. But it's the same thing for every entrepreneur. I look at people like right now that are self-employed in the mortgage business today. They have a hard time, making it work.
Yep.
Right now, there's people are not refinancing and they're definitely not buying homes for the moment. So what do
It's not
those
like it
people
doesn't happen. Yeah. It's not like it hasn't happened before either.
do?
Wasn't that
100%.
long ago.
Yeah. I run across these people who are delightful as far as I'm concerned. Like when we went to Alaska, there's a whole host of people that were there during the warm months being guides, for excursions from the cruise ships, right? And then what they did in the winter is they flew south and went to Florida or Alabama or even, to the Mediterranean or someplace like that, and then worked a winter job over there where it was warm and then came back again. And they just had the best lifestyle.
Mm,
And they made good money too.
I like that.
Yeah, that would be one of your vagabond things to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yep. Maybe I'll look into that one now.
You never know. You never know. But anyhow, so discernment, the whole critical thinking, in a blue pill or a red pill.
Well, it's valuable in every aspect of life, obviously. You can't 'cause making choices you do every single minute of your life. So every choice is a discernment. So it's there with, it's a valuable tool that you use throughout your day, hopefully well.
Yeah, and have you ever heard that the best investment you can ever do is in educating yourself? Whatever money you spend on adding more wrinkles to your brain is going to be a long-term better investment than almost anything else you can do. It's like,
And
the
along
path.
these lines, too, yeah, we talked about this before too, because I'm continuing with a philosophy class, and that one of their things is like don't accept or reject anything we say. And I know Ken's talked about this before, and Bill, you have too. It's like just you have to discern, basically, and figure out what fits you, like deep down what fits you.
In what you do with that, as opposed to being able to listen, memorize, and repeat and regurgitate back exactly what you heard, how do you make that practical application in your own life in terms of, isn't that what philosophy is all about? Like an opportunity to fine tune your compass,
And what
by
that's
feeding it. Yeah.
precisely the point. Well, it's the School of Practical Philosophy, so it's the class is designed specifically to do that, is to put it into practice, not to just read about.
Yeah. Yeah. That helix
And there's
model.
been
Yeah.
there's been hundreds and hundreds of years of heated debate over which philosophical discipline or approach is best. so so it tells you right there, even people focused on discernment can't agree on what that actually means. Yeah.
It's just like self-defense, right? Somebody who is a 10th degree black belt in jujitsu versus, Korean karate versus Brazilian, what you know and what you've been around, and the interesting people that I find is the ones who jump ship from one discipline to another to see how it changes their thinking, that the circular motions of kung fu versus the linear motions, of taekwondo. It's just a very, very interesting thing for people. um I'm trying to think of who it was. Was it Steven Seagal, who ended up going to a Shaolin monastery for 2 or 3 years because he wanted to change the way that he viewed the world, and not just learn more, more physicality.
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, it's interesting with I don't engage in a lot of conversations with people about martial arts style because again, they're pretty invested in why, you know, why theirs is the best. You run into a lot of that. But the ones, what I do enjoy in the conversations is why is that style the best for you? What are the things about it that's resonated and worked in your life or in your teaching of your students or whatever. That's always an interesting conversation because now it's not compare and contrast, it's just an exploration of how the value has been extracted in a beneficial way.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to forget this though, philosophy wise. So the writer of The Good Place, which was like a television show. It was actually a really cute show. I did watch it. But he wrote a book called How to Be Perfect, and it is like the most ridiculously fun and silly way to get introduced to philosophy and the idea of ethics and basically how to be what it means to be a good person and how complicated that is. His name is Michael Schur, Schur, but a very fun book, and he is not a philosopher. But he learned a lot about it and he's just sharing it from his perspective and what was shared with him through the research to write the show. But so if you like that kind of stuff, it's a good read.
The Good Place.
Yeah, The Good Place is the name of the show.
I'll be looking for that as soon as we hang up.
Yeah, no, it's a great show. How to Be Perfect is the book, and my favorite part is the cover. The T is misplaced off. So like the word perfect is not perfect. It's like it looks like a misprint. It's excellent.
I put it on my wish list.
Yeah, it's fun.
I love that our energy, that we're just kind of effervescent, and there's just so much good feeling going on inside. I had a very, very dear friend. Anytime something went wrong, anytime in his life when he got upset, he would start to giggle, and you know what he'd say? Perfect. Perfect.
That's perfect.
What you gonna do now? Anyhow, well, I'll tell you what, we've had a really nice chat again today, and we're getting to the top of our hour here. And I just want to reinforce to the folks at home, we continue to be in a world where there's an awful lot of illness. There's an awful lot of people that are struggling, to survive. And I don't mean that in an offhanded or flip way. I mean, their lives are at risk, and we all have loved ones that we know, or some kind of a flu or the COVID stuff or RSV. And I just want to ask you all to do something a little bit outside your comfort zone and call somebody and just let them know that the world is a better place because they're in it. And just pass that along and see what a difference that'll make. So anybody have any final thoughts for today?
I think that's a good final thought. Space for other people to have their own final thoughts.
A perfect final thought. Well, thank you again. Love you guys madly, and have the best week ever. Okay. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.